Today's edition of Pittsburgh Steelers Talk is sponsored by Mint Mobile. They are changing the game, the cell phone wireless plan is, with plans starting as low as $15 a month, and it runs on the largest 5G network. There's really no reason not to make the change, as we'll get into more in depth on today's show. But there is some news, roster moves going on here for Pittsburgh in training camp. Recent signee Jeremy McNichols, his season is already over. The Steelers put McNichols on injured reserve earlier today, and this does end his season unless he ends up being cut from IR, in which case a new team could sign him, but for the Steelers' purposes, his time is done this year for the organization. He'd been signed at the start of training camp to help provide some backup running back role. Remember, they had cut Trey Edmonds. They did add a new back. It's not Trey Edmonds. It's elite name alert, Master Teague, the Ohio State running back, formerly a very highly touted recruit. Unfortunately for Teague, in part due to some injuries, he never quite performed the way he was hoping to as his career went on. He had some hype early on, a really good season in his sophomore campaign, but he never ended up truly emerging as the key back. Frankly, his numbers went a little bit the wrong way. Slow start 2018, 2019 rushes for almost 800 yards. You're thinking this guy could turn pro in 2020. He could have a 1,000-yard season, go pro early. His touches plummeted. He fell out of favor with the organization, or not with the organization, the team, I should say, and never quite capitalized on some of that untapped talent. I was a bit surprised it took him until now to sign with the Steelers or somebody out there. I will say this, though. This is more of the same for the Steelers as it relates to the running back position. They are not adding big-time assets in terms of a competition player for Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland. This is we're rotating our backups. Jalen Warren, Mateo Durant. Maybe one of those guys impress and make your 53, but Master Teague now is just, we'll call him what he is. He's a camp body. He's a backup piece. He's not somebody who's going to play a huge role for this team in 2022, barring a true shock and or concern on the roster. So with that in mind, what is your one-word reaction to the move of signing Master Teague? I think name could be a fun one-word reaction, but I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section your one-word reaction to the move. My one word is depth. That's what this is. I almost went with just camp body or jag, neither of which is one word, so I didn't do it. Jag being just a guy. I don't think Teague's going to make a huge impact for you. Maybe he makes some nice plays in the preseason, as you know, you're not going to let Najee Harris play because why would you? So for the third preseason game, second preseason game, you give him some touches. Maybe he makes a splash and earns a practice squad spot. But for those of you who have been searching for a better running back too, that has not been added at this point. That's not what Master Teague, that's not what Jeremy McNichols was. This is a back end of the roster shuffling, not a big-time splash to be your new backup for Najee Harris. Coming up next, we have the latest on Diontae Johnson. Some interesting reports on the beginnings of the contract negotiations for Johnson and the Steelers. But first, we have a message for you from a Pittsburgh Steelers legend as things relate to the Pittsburgh Steelers talk. Our good friend Franco Harris has this to say. He says, real men turn on notifications. So if you want to be a real one and a real man, like Franco Harris suggests, make sure your notifications are set to all. Got to make sure you're logged into the app. Make sure you have them set up from the YouTube side. Turn on notifications for all channels, and of course, make sure they're turned on for us here at Pittsburgh Steelers Talk. Click the bell icon within the app and change it from personalized to all, and then make sure they're set up within the app itself, settings, YouTube, and then allow notifications. All right, on to Diontae Johnson. The reports are that the Steelers and Johnson have started discussions on an extension, but a couple different reports saying the sides are not close at this time, and that is important as far as I'm concerned, because I wonder how it all ties in. Pro Football Talk, Steelers and Johnson are far apart on a contract extension. And then I always mispronounce the name, but I'll try it again. Gerry Dulac, I forget how to pronounce it, and it makes me look like an idiot, so sorry about that. Sorry, Jerry. He says the possibility of getting a deal done before the September 11th season opener in Cincinnati is slim. That timeline is important because the Steelers typically, at least with the old regime, it is kind of a new one, don't do extensions mid-season. The number one thing I'm curious on is what the contract offers and or counter offers / asks are. What does Diontae Johnson want from the Steelers organization? What are the Steelers willing to offer him? If they're far apart, I wonder who's further away from what I believe the market value looks like. So we'll go a lot more in-depth on this momentarily. But I want to play a game. Put a deal you would offer Diontae Johnson in the comments. And then we will comment whether or not Johnson would take it. We'll make this the pinned comment, so go down to the pinned comment to play a game here. Drop your offer for Diontae Johnson, and we'll say too high, too low. The pinned comment, by the way, is the first comment you'll see. When you scroll down to the comments section, it's the one at the very top from us here at Steelers Talk. So go down there and drop your offer / contract idea for Diontae Johnson. Now, I will make note that I think $20 million per year is roughly the contract value you should be throwing for Diontae Johnson. More than that's too high. Less than that is probably a little bit too low, but it's somewhere in that range. And I think that's fair for Johnson. In a massively rising wide receiver market this offseason, things have blown up in a rather unusual way. The market always rises. This is a different type of rise so far for the Steelers, or for the receiving core. And Johnson's a young receiver coming off his best year ever, 1,000-yard campaign. We saw Christian Kirk, who wasn't that productive in Arizona, get $17, $18 million from the Jags. Johnson's better than Kirk. That's at minimum your baseline, and quite frankly, it's a little bit more in line with some of the other receivers out there. And this is the exact type of guy teams like to play. Young players on the rise. He's gotten better each and every single season. That should make teams, whether it's Pittsburgh or somebody else, feel good about a hypothetical contract extension. And if you want to feel good about your wireless coverage and your plans and all that stuff, make the switch over to Mint Mobile. Start saving today, mintmobile.com/chatsports. Unlimited talk and text on the largest 5G network with plans starting as low as $15 a month. Hell, you got the unlimited talk and text, the great coverage. Even your mom might ask you to stop calling so much, which is not the case with my mother. But I've made the switch to Mint Mobile, and I at least hear it a little bit less from that standpoint. If you want unlimited premium wireless, plans starting as low as $15 a month, then make the switch right now. mintmobile.com/chatsports. That link's in the comment section and the description of today's show. More on Johnson here. They don't often, the Steelers, I should say, give second deals, second contracts to wide receivers. There are some exceptions. They did it with Santonio Brown, and that worked out well up until the final year, and then AB went Mr. Big Chest in the end. Some notable receivers, relatively high draft picks, productive football players who never got second deals from the Steelers. JuJu Smith-Schuster kind of got a cheap second deal, but it wasn't a long-term extension, so I'll cross that one off the list. Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders has had a very long career after leaving Pittsburgh. The Steelers are so good as an organization when it comes to identifying and developing wide receiver talent. I don't think they feel the need to pay receivers big money, with some exceptions like Santonio Brown. So I don't know if Diontae Johnson is enough to change the trend. And that trend right now is he's probably going to ask for around top 10 wide receiver money. And although I love Diontae Johnson, I think in a bubble, he's worth that type of money. It's not a bubble for Pittsburgh. They have other young receiver talent. Do they want to commit $20, $21 million, somewhere in that range, to Diontae Johnson? We had a conversation here at the Chat Sports office. We kind of liken Johnson to T.Y. Hilton, where maybe he's not a full-fledged number one, but he's an elite wide receiver too, from that standpoint. So I think he's kind of worth the money. But I think the benchmark, the contract to really compare to for Johnson is not Deebo Samuel. It's not DK Metcalf. It's not Terry McLaurin. It's DJ Moore. And Moore was a first-round pick of the Carolina Panthers. He's making $20.6 million, a deal that now looks almost a little bit below market value because the Panthers were proactive in paying the guy that they believe is their wide receiver one. Who do you think, though, is the better wide receiver? Type in M for DJ Moore or J for Diontae Johnson. Let's look at the numbers here in depth. Johnson had similar targets to DJ Moore last season. The receptions were in favor of Diontae Johnson. Now, the average went down as the yards were almost identical. I think their roles are a little bit different, in part because of the differing quarterback struggles between Johnson and Big Ben and Moore and the hodgepodge of terrible quarterbacks Carolina tried last year. Touchdowns, I think you can blame on the quarterback side too. I'm a huge fan of DJ Moore. I also like Diontae Johnson a lot. I do believe that from an NFL perspective, Diontae Johnson is worth the money, even if I don't love him holding in from the organization. But I also know this for Pittsburgh. It's not like they don't have other options at receiver. You've got Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, even a guy like a Miles Boykin or Anthony Miller could be fine as your wide receiver 4 or 5 long term. If Claypool and or Pickens are the guys that the Steelers think they can be, and Calvin Austin can handle the slot duties, you might not need to pay Diontae Johnson big-time money. That can go somewhere else toward signing another offensive lineman next year or more defensive help or maybe even targeting a different receiver in free agency. So I am okay if Pittsburgh doesn't want to pay Diontae Johnson, but I think he's a damn good football player as well. So just keep that in mind when it's all said and done. Before we head out today, reminder to put the deal that you would offer Diontae Johnson in the comment section, specifically the pinned comments on today's video. That way you don't miss out and we can respond with whether or not we would take it or not. If you guys made it all the way to the end of today's video, by the way, we appreciate it. Type in "here we go," as so many of you do, in the comments.